Doctors could be on the brink of a breakthrough.
Migraines.
How to control them. Tame a migraine.
A severe migraine.
Throbbing, recurring headaches.
Given all the noise, navigating the migraine experience can be confusing and scary, but you do not have to do it alone. Welcome to the Migraine Guy Podcast, the official podcast of themigraineguy.com and theheadachreview.com. Now, here's your host.
What is up, everybody? It is Kevin here, the Migraine Guy, bringing you this week's edition of the Migraine Guy Podcast. If you're new to the pod, I hope you'll hit subscribe and leave some nice comments with a review on iTunes if that's where you are listening from, and most of you are, so please give me them good reviews. So, if you're new to the pod, I like to start off with a little bit of what's going on in my own migraine life before we dive into some news and interesting stuff that's happened in the last week or so in the migraine world. So with my migraines, as I've been saying for a while, the Tizanidine, the muscle relaxer I've been on, hasn't been as effective as it was the first 4 or 5 weeks that I took it. I've either developed a tolerance for it and need to increase the milligram dosage, which of course I am hesitant to do because of the sleepiness and grogginess that is associated with that, or I am supposed to give it, 3 or 4 weeks to filter out of my system and then go back on it. And I've been doing that second thing, taking, 3 weeks off of it and then trying to go back on it. And it never seems like when I go back on it that it's as potent, as powerful, as effective as it was when I first started taking it. So I'm kind of at a standstill with the Tizanidine. One thing that I have noticed that it does help with, which I've mentioned repeatedly, is my sleeping. That in conjunction with melatonin has really given me the ability to get deep and restful sleep for at least about 6 hours a night consistently, which is very, very helpful for me, since I don't think I have insomnia, but I have, more often than not, I will get 2 to 3 hours of sleep and then wake up for no reason and be unable to fall back asleep. So another thing that I've been doing with the Tizanidine, I just started it actually yesterday in response to a pretty rough migraine that I had all day. The pain was, only in that 5 to 6 pain range. This wasn't a debilitating one, but the amount of pressure and neck pain that I had was just not off the charts, but it was something I hadn't had in at least a couple weeks, and so it was very difficult to deal with. There was a lot of ice. I tried taking some naproxen, 1,000 milligrams that I'm allowed to take a day. And that didn't really break it. I even tried, I've been trying the ginger supplements that I had mentioned on the podcast a while ago as an abortive, and I'm not exactly sure if they've been helping overall. Sometimes it seems like when I take them, the pain does reduce. Other times it doesn't. I'm not sure if that's placebo effect or if it's other things that I'm doing. I haven't been very rigorous in my ginger testing, but in regards to the Tizanidine, last night when the migraine was getting rough, I just took it. I just took the Tizanidine, and it did, as a muscle relaxer, kind of make me groggy, make me not feel as much of the pain, and then help me sleep. And lots of other people. I posted a Tizanidine video actually yesterday, what it is, how it works, and how it's been helping me and how it hasn't been helping me for YouTube and Facebook followers. Posted that video yesterday and got lots of feedback from people who are in similar circumstances than me, saying lots of the exact same things and saying that Tizanidine does help as an abortive. It itself is not an abortive, but the idea of taking a medication that's going to get you groggy enough to fall asleep, and that way you're not conscious of the pain, you're not aware of the pain that the migraine would be causing otherwise, does in some ways make it a kind of abortive, a quasi-abortive. So for the short term anyway, I'm going to hang on to the Tizanidine for that purpose, both for sleep if I haven't had a good night's rest in a day or two, as well as kind of this quasi-abortive that, it's going to kind of kill my productivity in certain ways. If I get a migraine and need to take the Tizanidine, it's not going to make the migraine go away. It's going to make me fall asleep, at least for a few hours, and of course that's going to put a hamper on any sort of plans that I had. But, as all migraine sufferers are well aware of, when you're faced with either pain or breaking off plans, dealing with the pain is much more pressing than trying to suffer through the pain and be able to go do the thing that you had planned to do. At least when the pain and symptoms, the side effects of the migraine are as potent as they were for me yesterday. So that's kind of where I'm at. Nothing crazy big going on. I need to get in to see my neurologist. I've been saying that for a couple weeks now, and I keep forgetting to make an appointment because I'm not exactly sure what I want to say to him. That's the bigger thing. Is I could go in and say that the Tizanidine has kind of reached its end and everything that I just said to you. But then the next course of action is, well, what are we going to do next? Do we want to try to get on the Aimovig? Do we want to try Botox? Do we want to try yet another muscle relaxer and see how that works, and maybe cycle between tizanidine and it? I know a couple people had mentioned that in the comments section of the tizanidine video I posted yesterday. So there are a lot of options, and none of them just are shouting out to me as very good. And knowing the neurologist as I do, I know that his approach is to kind of let me take the reins and talk about stuff with him. He of course, I don't know if he's actually thinking about that is the strategy, but that has been what the strategy has been. I come to him with ideas and kind of poke him and prod him to understand why I want to do one thing rather than another. And more often than not, he's been accommodating to me for the things that I've recommended. So that's kind of where I'm at. I guess I'm kind of hovering right now. I don't really have a particular plan, and I don't have a particular strategy that I'm implementing. Just got a lot of stuff going on today and this summer, and so I'm just trying to function. I'm trying to get through it. I'm trying to be able to be the best version of myself that I can be with migraine, and do a lot of things both financially for my family and to help other people who are requesting that I do certain projects for them and that kind of stuff. So it's just going to be a busy summer, and hopefully the regimen that I've been on, even though the migraines haven't at all gone away, they are a little bit less. And so if that could last throughout the summer, I guess I would count that as success. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now. So if you're new to the pod, this is how we start it, and then we're about to hop into a bit of migraine news, something interesting that has cropped up in the last week or 10 days or so. So with that being said, let's get to it. All right, so this week's bit of migraine news comes to us from Jamie Rosenberg, who published a summary of a study that recently came out on June 14th. And the name of this article is Timolol Eye Drops Effective in Some Patients with Acute Migraine. Now, as we all know, the FDA has previously approved lots and lots of different kinds of beta blockers for migraine prevention. However, they are limited to being used for acute migraines. A recent study published by the JAMA Neurology Journal, JAMA, investigated the use of Timolol eye drops as an acute migraine treatment. Now, Timolol is a pretty common beta blocker, and the eye drop version of it is typically used to treat high pressure inside of a patient's eye due to glaucoma, the open angle type anyway, and some other eye-based diseases, ocular hypertension, for example. And if you can lower the eye pressure or lower the pressure inside of the eye, this can help prevent blindness associated with those conditions. Now, given that beta blockers are an FDA-approved prophylactic, a preventative treatment for migraine, the researchers wanted to see if a liquid beta blocker dropped into the eyes would have any sort of preventative properties for migraine sufferers. And so the study looked at a randomized crossover placebo-controlled pilot study in order to try and test this out. So they enrolled patients 18 years or older who met the IHS, the International Headache Society's criteria for migraine. Now, the actual study, now there are always going to be these kind of limitations that we need to keep in mind. The actual study only had 10 participants, so this is a extremely maybe paltry size for a study, but it's at least an initial study, right? This is the kind of thing that could kick off some further research down the line, especially since, to my knowledge, the eyedropper version of the beta blocker has never been tested in regards to migraines. And so if this could be a beneficial prophylactic treatment, something that is both easily to access, beta blockers are very, very easy to get prescribed by your doctor because of the fairly low risks associated, especially with migraine, as well as the fact that they are usually very, very inexpensive. And so if you could get an eyedropper version that was better than the pill version of the beta blocker, that would be great for migraine sufferers. So they take these 10 participants, and over the course of 4 months is when they tracked whether or not the Timolol eye drops would help or reduce their migraine attacks per month. And between the 10 participants, in those 4 months, they had 198 migraine attacks, which is pretty wild when you think about it. 10 people in 4 months getting almost 200 migraines is roughly 5 migraines per person per month, and that's of course an average, and so there's going to be a lot of variation in there. Some probably had a few, others probably more in the chronic range, but overall that was what the participants experienced in terms of their migraine attacks in 4 months. Now, what they found wasn't overwhelmingly positive because of the extremely small sample size, which they do state in the study, but on a scale from 1 to 4, which is how they measure the effectiveness of the Timolol versus placebo, the Timolol had a 2.4, whereas the placebo had a 1.4. And if you want to know how they got those numbers and whatnot, you can actually look at the details of the study, which I will link in the show notes below. But the main takeaway is that in a very, very small pilot study like this one, there does seem to be at least some reason to think that a more rapidly absorbed version of a beta blocker as a migraine prophylactic could be a better way to introduce the medication into your system rather than in pill form, which is probably how almost all migraine sufferers ingest it. I know the beta blockers that I have tried have all been pill form, and it didn't even dawn on me to even ask the doctor if there was another form to take that would get it in my system faster and more effectively. And so this study is at least interesting because there will probably be a few more studies following, hopefully very, very soon, about whether or not different kinds of beta blockers that can be given in eye drop form can be replicated. The results of this study can be replicated in a larger scale study with migraine sufferers, because even though we do have some awesome new preventatives on the market like the Aimovig and the other CGRP meds that'll be out in the next couple years, they do have some negatives associated with them, mostly in terms of financial cost and insurance coverage. And so something like a better version of a beta blocker, which might help a lot more migraine sufferers, is a good thing to examine as well. And we shouldn't just put all of our eggs in one CGRP basket. And so interesting study. As I said, it'll be linked in the show notes if you want to check out some of the details. I know we have a couple statistic PhD holders who always like to dig into the details of the studies that I talk about, so they will be there for you to check out. And if you have any sort of comments or criticisms about the study or about how I have summarized it, please do not hesitate to let me know about that wherever you are listening to this on, either if you're listening on the Headache Reviews website or on iTunes or on Facebook or YouTube. Please let me know if there's anything I could have covered better about this, but I think I covered all of the bases. So that being said, that's the end of migraine news. Now we are going to hop on to, what are we going to get to next? Maybe your migraine tip of the week. What's up, everybody? It's Kevin here, the Migraine Guy. We will get back to the content in just a moment. I wanted to let you know that if you appreciate this content enough to donate as little as $1 a month to the Migraine Guy, you can do so over at the website patreon.com/the Migraine Guy. That's patreon.com/the Migraine Guy. Patreon has become a bastion for content creators online to get crowdsourced funding for their content creation. Patreon both encrypts your information very securely, as well as takes a very, very small percentage before the content creators that you're contributing to get the funds. I know that every single dollar that is contributed helps month to month, and you can contribute as little as $1 per month, as little as $12 per year to show the Migraine Guy, to help me get the kind of weekly and monthly content out about migraine and headache-related illnesses that I have been doing for the last few years. If that's the kind of thing that you value, I really hope you'll consider donating as little as $1 per month to help me cover the cost of website hosting, online content creation, and hardware upgrades and software upgrades necessary to keep the content relevant and professional. So if that's the kind of thing that you want to help contribute to, if you want to directly contribute to migraine awareness, both in the United States and worldwide, you can do so at patreon.com/the migraine guy. Let us now get back to the content. So this week's migraine tip of the week has to do with your employer. Now, this isn't going to be something that you can probably implement directly unless you are the employer at your workplace, but it is something to keep in mind in terms of discussing with your boss different ways, or if you have access to people who are in charge of the actual financials associated with the insurance policies of your company. This could be the kind of thing that you could raise to them and try to convince them to alter some of the healthcare options that they give you because of the cost associated with migraine treatment. Now, the name of the article is sadly Migraines Giving Employers a Headache, which is of course just one of those lazy puns that people use when they talk about migraines, but we'll overlook the article title because the content is pretty good. Now, the article is summarizing an analysis of a survey that was conducted by the Integrated Benefits Institute, the IBI, and they did an analysis of the survey put out by the Agency for Health Research and Quality from a couple years ago. The study looked at numbers from 2011 to 2015 and looked at the financial impact on average for employers who have migraine patients, migraine sufferers as employees. Now, some of this data has been out in various ways for a number of years. The IBI's numbers, of course, are going to be from 2011 to 2015, but there are lots of surveys and studies of surveys that have done this kind of thing. So this is just another one in a fairly long line of such studies. But some of the things that they highlight, I think, are interesting in terms of what you might be able to do and impact at your workplace in order to get better health care coverage by your employer. So some of the numbers that they found: employees treated, I'll quote here, employees treated for migraines had higher healthcare costs on average than employees without migraine treatments, a difference of about $2,000 per year. End quote. You know, this is pretty boilerplate stuff. Obviously, people who have a chronic health condition are going to be going to the doctor more, doing more in terms of testing and getting different medications prescribed and filled and refilled. And so, of course, there's going to be more expense associated with migraine sufferers than a, quote unquote, healthy employee. So that part wasn't too striking. What I did find striking was the following quote: companies that offer healthcare benefits, paid sick days, and disability insurance benefits can expect about $84,000 in annual migraine-related costs for every 1,000 people employed, the report noted. And nearly one-third of those costs are for lost work time due to migraines, end quote. Now, $84,000 for every 1,000 employees, when you average that out, right, is only $84 per person, so it doesn't seem like it's that big of an expense. But of course, not all of those 1,000 people are going to have migraines. Let's say only 10% of them did. Let's say 100 people had migraines. Then the amount lost per that 100 would be $840, which of course is a much, much higher price to pay when you have, let's say, 100 migraine employees or 100 employees who get migraine. And so you can see how when a business or a company is trying to plan, say, the insurance policies that they're going to be offering for their employees, they take these numbers into account in order to figure out if they want certain things covered or certain things not covered. And one thing that I liked about this article is that it highlights that hopefully employers will take productivity into account when they consider adding new treatment options to their benefit plans and workplace policies. That way, people with migraines can stay on the job. That's really the takeaway. The sad thing about these kind of surveys and studies is that they're double-edged swords, right? On the one hand, yes, hopefully employers will take productivity into account and the ways in which they can help their employees be more productive by offering better insurance policies that cover better treatments for conditions that they are likely to have employees that sorry, that was a bad way of saying it, offer treatment plans for disorders and conditions that they are likely to have employees to have. And so the idea here is that that would be a great upside to this study. The downside, of course, is that given that it is more expensive to have a migraine sufferer as an employee than to have a quote-unquote healthy person as an employee, you could see how restricting coverage to certain treatment options might, weed out the migraine sufferers from working at your company, and so you can have more healthy people there and be more productive rather than do the upfront cost coverage as an investment in your employees. And so I don't know exactly how these kind of stats and studies go into a large company or even a small company's budget plan for the year and how they figure out the health insurance systems that they're going to be using. But like I said, if you have access to people in that area, or your company has a kind of feedback system where you can either email suggestions, hopefully anonymously, about what you would like to see the company do. This is definitely one area where you can hit them up and hit them repeatedly. Let them know how, migraine has affected your particular ability to do your job on a day-to-day basis, a monthly basis, how many sick days you've had to take, how your doctor can provide all of the information showing that you are not faking or you're not being dramatic or hypochondriac about your condition, and that if they were to do something like include an insurance policy that covered maybe Botox or the CGRP med, something like Aimovig or one of the upcoming ones, that could produce in you a much higher ability to show up to work regularly and show up to work ready to work, and not kind of having maybe a bad headache and maybe some jaw pressure and cognitive fog in the background. That you're able to work through, but not work at your optimal level. And so if they could start covering some of these medications, if they could offer better healthcare plans overall for employees, then that has the benefit of you being a better employee. Now, it's not going to fix everybody, of course, and certainly the Botox treatment and the CGRP meds aren't going to fix every migraine sufferer, but the hindrance to Botox and CGRP meds right now is cost and the way insurance companies choose to cover them. My insurance company, for example, and many people have confirmed this with their insurance companies, is that Botox is kind of at the top tier of migraine prevention. And so many insurance companies want you to go through medications A, B, C, and D before you even get to talk to them about having Botox offered. And, on average, you're giving these medications 4 to 6, maybe 8 weeks to work in your system, and you have to go through 4 of them. That can be 16 weeks. That can be 3 months of you waiting and trying different medications before they cover something that has a higher effective rate, just because they want to rule out any cases that could be covered by lower level medications. Instead, if you had a better insurance policy that said, let's start with the most effective and then work down, you might see results faster, and you might be a more productive employee much sooner. And so, as I said, it's a double-edged sword, 2 sides to the same coin. One employer who reads this might say, well, we're going to cut benefits because I don't want to have to cover the extra expense. Other employers might say, you know what? I care about my employees and I want to invest in their health now. That way they can return on that investment with years of productivity at the job. And one way to help get the employees to be on the better side of that coin is to hassle them to cover the kind of treatment options that you want. So the tip of the week is to be the squeaky wheel at your company and really dig in, and hopefully you can do it anonymously because you don't want to be the squeaky wheel that they could fire and then not have the squeak anymore. That would be just as bad. So do it smartly. Yeah. Pretty interesting. I will, of course, link that in the show notes as well. Now let's get to the migraine question of the week. All right, this week's migraine question of the week comes to us from Jen Leones, and she asked about when the new CGRP med Aimovig and the other ones will be available in Canada. And as many of you know, the FDA approved the Aimovig medication a few weeks ago, but that of course doesn't tell anyone outside of the United States whether or not the new CGRP meds are going to be available to them in any time in a timely fashion. And so as far as Canada goes, I found an interview with a neurologist, Dr. Cyan Spacey, who's an associate clinical professor of neurology at UBC and director of the headache clinic at a post-secondary school. And in the interview, there was a question about the new CGRP meds that have been approved in the U.S. and when Canadians could expect access to them. And she said, quote, "There is a new category of drugs coming out called CGRPs. They have already been approved in the United States, and here's the important part, we anticipate they will be coming to Canada in the autumn." And that is extremely exciting. Now, the interview doesn't press on any further, and I haven't heard back in my email to Dr. Spacey about what she meant coming to Canada in the autumn, because of course the downside is that could just mean that it's coming to Canada for testing, and the testing itself could take years before the Canadian equivalent of the FDA approves the medication, which would be sad, but hopefully that means that it is coming to Canada for to be prescribed to patients. It is coming to be approved and offered to migraine patients, and that would be very, very exciting. And apparently, Jen also informed me that many medications that do get approved in the United States can sometimes take 5 or 7 years to get approved in Canada, and there's obviously a number of reasons for that. One is, the ways in which the FDA tests medication are not going to be the same way in which other countries test medication, but also probably the more weighty of the considerations would be something like the pharmaceutical companies push medications for approval in countries where they can make the most money first. And as many of us know, in the United States, drug companies make lots and lots of money off of us and off of the medications that they price. In particular ways, and the ways in which insurance companies do and do not cover those costs. And so Canada obviously would be lower on a pharmaceutical company's list to get a medication put out than something like the United States, because they are going to get much, much higher return on the investment that they put into developing the medication. But the fact that this doctor said that it's coming to Canada in autumn is hopefully good news for Canadian migraine sufferers. So, of course, the thing to do then, if you're in Canada, is to start hassling your doctor, your neurologist, or your headache specialist, whoever you see for your migraines, and start pestering them about when are the meds coming out, what do you know about them, would you feel comfortable with me trying them, etc., etc. All of those kind of questions that we need to be proactive about, because even, a good migraine doctor might not be ready to prescribe these kind of medications, or might not even be that aware that they're coming soon. So make sure that you at least put the bug in your doctor's ear if you live in Canada. Big shout out to Jen for asking the question. Glad I was able to find at least some answer from some authoritative figure in Canada. And of course, if you have a migraine question, feel free to ask it to me on social media. Just search The Migraine Guy wherever you are on social media. Also, it doesn't have to be a question. It can also be a comment, or it could be a story. It could be your migraine story. If you feel comfortable sharing it, you can of course record some audio and send it to me on Facebook. Facebook Messenger allows you to record audio and send it. Or you could type out your story or record audio on your phone and send it to me via email. You can just send it to themigraineguy@gmail.com. If you want it to be anonymous, you can simply let me know that if you're sharing something that you think is important, but you're somewhat either sensitive about or embarrassed about, or don't want anyone to know that it is you in the story. We can, of course, accommodate that. But the important part is to get a lot more community, get a larger part of the podcast community to share their stories. That way other people who are listening, and we have thousands of people who are downloading every month, so letting everyone else know that there are other migraine sufferers out there is a very valuable part of the technological advances that we have. We can do all sorts of really cool things to help integrate the community. That way people who are like you with your particular migraines can hear from someone like them, because I certainly don't cover the entire migraine spectrum, and nothing that I can ever study is going to help me cover that, whereas you have your first person experience with your particular conditions and symptoms and life events, and those are the things that can help connect other migraine sufferers to you, even if it's anonymous, just so that they know that they're not alone. So let's get on that migraine community. Hit me up with whatever kind of info you want on here, comments, questions, or stories for this new section of the podcast. That being said, let us get to the end of the show. All right, everyone, thank you for listening to this week's edition of the Migraine Guy podcast. We're coming up, we're not quite there, but we are coming up on episode 50, which is pretty darn cool, halfway to triple-digit podcast numbers. So thanks to every single one of you who has listened. Thank you to every single one of you who has subscribed. Thank you to every single one of you who has left a positive review on iTunes. Those reviews do matter. Thank you so much. Again, if you need a migraine support group, you know where to find mine. You can head over to Facebook and just search the Migraine Guy Support Group. You have to answer a couple questions before we let you in, but that's just to filter out the bad people who want to try and take advantage of our community. We have a very, very strong support community, and we're very focused on the support aspect of it. Lots and lots of people sharing their circumstances, and people offering suggestions, people offering support, people just being compassionate to one another when they need it. That's what our group is about. So if you need one of those groups, please check it out. Also, migraine news, migraine tips don't stop when this podcast ends. So you can, of course, follow me on social media. Just search The Migraine Guy wherever you are on social media, and you will find me. Make sure to like The Migraine Guy's Facebook page, follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and subscribe on YouTube. And I of course say this every week because it's true and I want it to be driven home to everybody, but if you feel alone, you do not have to. You're not alone. You're one of millions and millions, perhaps 1 billion people who get migraines. And even though your circumstance might be terrible, you might have nobody who understands you. You might not have any friends or family that support you. You can always hit me up on social media. You can always reach out in the support group if you need, a virtual hug, an electronic hug, and you can get it, because the point of everything that we do here at the Migraine Guy and the Headache Review is for you to know that you are not alone.